Our next speaker is Frank Bardonaro. He has more than 25 years experience in the heavy equipment industry, including senior roles in both crane manufacturing and rental. He joined Maxim Crane Works in 1988 and rose to become general manager at the time of his departure in 2001. He then worked at Amquick for almost 9 years, becoming president and CEO before joining Terex Cranes America as vice president in September 2010. In 2011, he was promoted to the position of managing director and vice president of global sales of Terex Cranes based in Europe. In October 2012, he joined Maxim Crane Company as president, sales and business development. Frank's topic today is linked to the last speaker who was talking about business ownership. Frank today is going to talk about what private equity companies can do in today's crane industry. Frank.
Thank you. When I heard that resume, I guess that's what private equity does to people, because I've been bouncing around a bit. I'm not a private equity guy. I don't like private equity companies. I've been around them since 2000. I learned all the good and bad about them. What I do know is they're a lot like the wind industry today. They're here, they're growing, they're going to be around, and for you guys in the room and other people we work with, I think we have to learn to work with them safely and profitably. So with that being said, I want to talk a little bit about how PE got involved with the crane and lifting industry from experience. Talk about what they did wrong early, how they're evolving, the pros and cons, and then in the end, how maybe if you are interested in selling your business or looking for something other than handing it over to the family, as we just heard about Hans, some ways to maximize your value. Got a lot of bullets in these slides, but I'm going to hit on them pretty quickly. In early 1999, Bain Capital really got into the crane industry in the U.S. They rolled up Anthony Crane, Maxim Crane, well, Carlisle Crane, about 30 companies all in to form what today is Maxim Crane. You know, the crane industry is perfect for the private equity world. Their MBAs are smart. It's a very highly fragmented industry worldwide. You know, so when they look at it on paper, they say, wait a minute, we can roll up all these industries, buy these $20 million, $30 million, $50 million companies, roll them up, get the synergies. You know, their view early on was that, well, gosh, if a crane owner who has a 5th grade education can do it, we can do it better. They kind of missed the boat on that early. You know, most of the crane owners are more savvy than they were on the street. It's that size of the fighting dog we just heard about. So the early guys gave, in my mind, the private equity world had a bad reputation. Competitors didn't like them being in our industry. The sellers at the time in the early 2000s, they got as much money as they could and they didn't care what happened after that. The private equity guys felt like they could pay, no matter what they paid, they could get it back. I was just talking to Mitch Landry's wife earlier, and she said, well, aren't they all over levered? And they were. They were all debt. They had no equity, no skin in the game. They thought they could overpay, work it out down the road. And that's really what failed in North America, at least in the early to mid 2000s, with the guys being involved. As I mentioned, you know, overpaying was one thing. Some of the things that they learned early on, and these guys are very smart, they adapt very quickly. You know, the early entries into the market, they brought in outside teams that were not industry experts, they were finance experts. They looked at us as a production company or a widget. They didn't understand that, you know, 4,100 Manitowocks don't always sell for twice what you paid in 1970. These guys thought assets lived forever, that they could be resold at 100% or more of original equipment cost. So they really didn't quite understand our market. They didn't understand the peaks and valleys of our cycle. They really didn't have the appetite to ride through a cycle. And I think more importantly, they didn't realize how important the guys in the field running the day-to-day operations were. So there was a us versus them mentality. So that's an early, mid to early 2000s. That is what the private equity world looked like in our business in North America. What's happened in the mid-2000s to today, and I've been involved with buying or selling about 30 companies, probably 3 times in private equity. You know, I just heard the great, I thought, presentation from Hans on succession planning. If you look at, and most of you know people that have sold or are involved with private equity today, the one common theme is within 5 years after a sale, there is no family member left running that part of the business anywhere. You may have handed it over to a guy like myself from the outside to come in, but the actual founder of the company leaves, and I'll talk more about that later on. But what these guys today that have rolled up NCSG, and I think Ted's here, NCSG, First Reserve, buying TNT, all these big multiples, all these numbers we're seeing. One thing that we can say is different today is they're putting their money in play. They're not just borrowing everything. They're not being over-levered like they were in the early stages. They actually have skin in the game today. Some of that is regulatory, and they're not allowed to lever up as much. A lot of it is just common sense, and they realize if they have to ride through a downturn, they can't have this huge amount of debt on the business. So they're smart people. They're figuring it out. They're doing a lot more due diligence. They're not just listening to whatever we tell them as a seller. They're really digging in to understand what the fleet value is, what the maintenance looks like. You know, they're not going to just overpay today and say, oh, we can delever it later because we're smarter than them. The roundup buyers out there since really the late 2000s, I believe, is a lot better for us and for the industry. You know, like James King told me, he said, they don't care about cranes, they only care about money. Well, as long as we all realize that, then there is an opportunity to succeed in selling our businesses or working with them for the next part of the cycle and the next round of ownership. There's a tremendous amount of advantages out there, I believe, for owners in the crane industry and for the industry itself. We talk about, you know, I would rewrite my whole presentation after listening to Hans, because when you hear 60 to 80% of the people out there don't have a succession plan or don't have someone they can hand the business off to, I think that's the reality of it. And that is that as these companies grow today, you have to get bigger to stay in place. You have to grow. You know, years ago when we had a family business that originally sold to Bain Capital in '99, you dominated the market. You were 1 or 2 players in the market, usually one. But today, because of the need to go outside your geographic region, the need to grow and the need to expand, the things that private equity brings to the table with unlimited access to capital. You talk about the estate planning. This, you know, a 7-year, I don't know many owners that have 7 years of vision to what they want to do to sell their company. Most of them think about it their whole life, and then they say, well, wait a minute, I got to sell it in the next year, how do I do that? Well, very rarely do they have a plan in place to do it that quickly. With private equity, you could actually start a process. The last 2 companies we bought, we closed one in 90 days, we closed one in 120 days, and one was about a $100 million deal. You can start a process and close it within 6 months, deal with private equity. You're not really going to do that through an estate planning method. Personal liability today. We've talked about safety. Safety's been a great part of this industry, these events. We're all doing better at eliminating accidents or reducing them. But what we haven't been able to do and will never be able to do is reduce the liability that does come upon us during a financial or an accident or injury. So when you want to take some chips off the table, private equity allows you to do that. There's the defragmentation of the industry. Whether we like them or we don't like the PE involved, whether we sell to them or we don't sell to them, I would maintain that part of the reason we're seeing rationalized pricing and ability to start driving margins for all of us is that the financial models that they require to buy equipment, we can't just go out like when it's a family business, when you want to do tax avoidance, not evasion, When you went to do tax avoidance, you bought more cranes, you got the depreciation. You sit there in December, you call the factory, what cranes do you have available? You go buy them. That doesn't happen anymore. We can't buy cranes on a whim. You have to put together financial models of how many of these types of cranes will you be able to use for the next 12 to 24 months, what kind of ROI will you get back, what utilization. So all those factors with some of the companies that are rolling up in the U.S. are coming into play. And I think all of our friends that we talk to out here are hearing some of it, which is good for the rental business, bad for the manufacturers. And I think some of the OEMs are feeling some of that, and that the buying sprees that we all used to have now been somewhat suppressed, and that's partially due to the fact that we have modeling we have to do to buy cranes. The opportunity to reinvest as a seller and as a family estate planning. Maybe you don't succeed in handing the business over to your child or relatives, but you absolutely succeed in taking chips off the table to distribute in a different manner to your family, as well as if you believe in the company and you want to keep family involved, you do get to reinvest with the ownership of a private equity firm. And I'm going to fly through some of these because the last 4 slides I think are more important for this group. Finding the right buyer, I've had good experiences and bad through my 20 years of dealing with the PE guys. This is as important as getting the price. I didn't know what a fundless sponsor was in 2005 and 6. Well, for those of you that do know, that's good. For those of you that don't, that means somebody that comes to you to want to buy you really doesn't have the money, but he agrees to buy your company, then he goes out and raises it all, and then that is all debt without a lot of equity in it. And now you're dealing with 5 or 6 owners, you don't really have the continuity of running the business. So the point is, if you find a buyer that has experience in our sector, that has a board or advisory board that wants to help you improve your business but doesn't want to just tell you how to run it. A lot of these things are important if you really want your company to succeed after you sell it and you're not just worried about getting a check. It's very important to have alignment between the people buying you and the management team that you're leaving in place. So I bring that up because back in early rounds of skepticism that we all had towards private equity, all these negotiations were done in the back room. You would see the owners sitting in the room, closing the boardroom, working until 9 at night with the CFO. You didn't know what was going on, but you knew something was going on. And then all of a sudden they came out and say, hey, we're selling the company. Well, today I think that it's important to involve your senior management team early on so that they're comfortable with whoever's buying it. Because the last thing you want to do is sell your company to a buyer who thinks they're getting a management team, and then the management team doesn't like them, so they go out and go to work for your competitor, and you leave the current employees in a bad position, you leave the buyer in a bad position. It's really not a successful strategy for integration and growth. So you really need to feel comfortable with the buyer and know what their history is in our space. When I talk about history in the space, I think these slides are all available later, so don't try to copy any of this. There's a lot on here. The point is, there are about 20, 25 companies today that either own a piece of or all of the crane lifting or rigging company, aerial work platform companies, big European crane rental companies. I don't list on here. The 2 of the biggest in the world have private equity involved. Tower crane manufacturer based in Europe has private equity involved or did. Another couple of manufacturers are some form of a private equity or portfolio management company. The point is, these names on here, when you hear Blackstone and you see Platinum Equity owns us and Apollo, these people, these are some of the most financially sound organizations in the world, and they like our space a lot. And they're getting smarter in our space. As an owner, a lot of family-owned businesses out there, you guys can go out and buy a $10 million company and roll it in, $20 million company and roll it in. But when you buy 10 of them, and all of a sudden you're worth $200, $300, $400 million, who is going to buy you if you don't have a family succession plan? The reality is you're probably going to be talking to one of these private equity companies. And there will be more in it. I talked to David earlier in macro, and he said that they're hitting or chasing into Latin America now. That these guys all learn after there were some really bad deals out there. I mean, there may be a few more deals that are legacy bad deals, but the reality